Parents' rights or censorship, a new law that bans certain student groups in every Texas public school, now faces a challenge in court.
It tells us that who we are is controversial and unwelcome.
Now some students are pushing back. What's at stake in the battle ahead? State leaders announce a major investment in healthcare for rural Texans.
An essential component of those communities being able to succeed is having access to healthcare.
We look closer at the needs facing smaller communities in the state and the financial boost coming from the feds. And a shift in the race for U.S. Senate. We look at changes in recent polls and why Donald Trump could be a key factor in who wins the Republican nomination.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. It's a law that affects every public and charter school in Texas, and now it's being challenged in court. Senate Bill 12 is set to take effect on Monday. One provision of the law outlaws DEI and LGBTQ+ student groups. State Correspondent Adam Schwager talks with one of the lawyers bringing the case.
But when our stories are labeled as inappropriate, it tells us that who we are is controversial and unwelcome.
Azama Sadiq is a student in the A-Leaf Independent School District and a senior policy associate at Students Engaged in Advancing Texas, or SEAT. Under a soon-to-be-implemented law, SEAT says they'd be forced to censor themselves from talking about race, ethnicity, and gender identity on school property, and claims it violates their First Amendment rights.
We believe it's blatantly unlawful for the state government to try to ban all clubs across the state that support LGBTQ+ students.
Opponents are calling it a student identity censorship bill, but its proponents call it a parent's Bill of Rights.
The Texas tradition of supporting and expanding and safeguarding the rights and roles of parents in their kids' upbringing and their children's education.
While the bill is expansive, the lawsuit targets 4 key areas. Bans on any reference to gender identity, sexual orientation, race or ethnicity in any school policies, bans on any faculty assisting in gender social transitioning, bans on any faculty aiding or helping students with gender identity or sexual orientation questions, and then bans on any gender identity or social orientation geared student groups. The ACLU and students like Sadiq hope the court stop the measure before it's set to go into effect on Labor Day.
Every student in Texas deserves the freedom to learn and the right to see ourselves reflected in our schools.
The bill's author, while arguing in favor of the measure earlier this year, said it all comes down to the parents.
At its core, the Texas Parental Bill of Rights in education is about reaffirming that parents are the chief decision makers for their children.
In Austin, I'm Adam Schwager.
Taking a closer look at what this law does, it requires districts to give families a standardized parental rights form at enrollment and every school year. That form covers a lot, including letting parents know they have a right to review instructional materials, including library books. And it standardizes the right to remove a child from certain instruction without academic penalty. This has historically included health and sex education. The law also requires schools to notify parents about health-related services, things like counseling or emotional support. Parents must get written notice before school starts each year, and they have the right to withhold consent. Another bill facing a legal challenge is the plan to redraw the state's congressional voting districts. Lawmakers passed the redistricting bill last weekend. On Friday, Governor Greg Abbott posted video showing him signing the bill into law. But even before the governor signed the legislation, the redistricting plan was already facing challenges in court. On Tuesday, the NAACP announced it had filed a lawsuit claiming the map strips black voters of their political power. NAACP President Derek Johnson released a statement saying the state's intent here is to reduce the members of Congress who represent black communities, and that in and of itself is unconstitutional. Governor Abbott and other Republican leaders maintain the redistricting plan is simply designed to boost Republicans, which is legal. He said lawsuits to block the maps will not succeed.
We have every reason to believe we will prevail in that litigation. Those maps should go into effect very quickly, and it's going to result in 5 new Republicans elected to the United States House of Representatives from the great state of Texas.
The The redistricting plan faces other lawsuits, including one filed by LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. That lawsuit states that the redrawn districts violate voter protection laws.
Rural America is in crisis, and the rural hospitals are absolutely critical for them surviving these crises.
Small communities across Texas face challenges to provide medical care. Now a new investment from the feds aims to boost rural health care in Texas. A shift in the race for Senate. The change in the polls shows John Cornyn and Ken Paxton in a tighter race. We look at the numbers and why they matter. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joined Governor Abbott at the Capitol for a roundtable on rural health care initiatives. It comes as state leaders announced that Texas is guaranteed to receive $100 million per year for the next 5 years for rural health care. The money is the state's share of the $50 billion federal Make America Healthy Again initiative, also known as MAHA. Governor Abbott says the state will use the money to help new mothers, children, seniors, and uninsured Texans. The funding will also help staffing in small towns in need of healthcare workers.
We have an obligation to ensure that those communities are going to be able to succeed. And an essential component of those communities being able to succeed is having access to healthcare.
More than 190 Texas counties, home to nearly 60 million people, qualify as rural. Our Sam Stark goes in depth to take us to one Central Texas community that could really benefit from this influx of cash.
Paint chips off from the sign for the St. Mark's Medical Center in LaGrange. It once provided emergency services and orthopedic surgery, but it now sits abandoned, leaving a large space in the LaGrange community.
That's had a huge impact. People were using that hospital to have access to emergency services, and now they don't have that.
Sherry Keller is the CEO of one of the larger healthcare clinics in LaGrange. She said that since the hospital closed, more people are putting off getting the care they need.
There's an increase of people waiting to the last minute and coming here, and then EMS has to transport them to Austin.
Rural Texas is vital to our state.
On Thursday, government leaders, including Texas Governor Greg Abbott and U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr., met to discuss how the state can improve rural health care outcomes.
Rural America is in crisis, and the rural hospitals are absolutely critical for them surviving these crises.
In the past 15 years, more than 20 rural Texas hospitals have closed because of financial issues. Abbott and RFK Jr. celebrated state and federal initiatives recently passed that will infuse more money into improving rural healthcare infrastructure.
Texas provided more than $300 million to address the needs of healthcare in rural Texas.
Keller hopes some of the money makes it down to LaGrange so the city's hospital might reopen.
Want to move out this way, out to the rural. It's like a dream of everybody in the big city to move out to the country. But then you come out here and there's just not the infrastructure in healthcare.
In LaGrange, Sam Stark, State of Texas.
Secretary Kennedy spent 2 days in Austin. He started his visit by joining Governor Abbott for a ceremonial bill signing of Make America Healthy Again legislation in Texas. The signings included bills to increase physical activity in public and charter schools, to label food chemicals banned in other countries, and to ban purchase of candy and sugary drinks with food stamps. Kennedy received a warm welcome from Texas Republican lawmakers, who he later praised as leading the nation.
40% of the food manufacturers in this country have now agreed to remove the 9 synthetic petroleum-based dyes from their food. Why did they do that? They didn't do it because they're scared of me. They did it because they're scared of what's happening here in Texas today.
Secretary Kennedy also praised Texas lawmakers for passing a ban on cell phones in schools. He has called that a critical step to improve student learning and well-being. It's the big race on next year's ballot. Now we're seeing signs of a shift in the race for U.S. Senate.
Some polls certainly showing a much more narrow race between these two candidates.
We look at changes in recent polls in the race for U.S. Senate and why Donald Trump could be a key factor in who wins the Republican nomination.
What I'm seeing is the Texans are hungry for change. They're hungry for new leadership. They're hungry for somebody who will put them first. That's what I want to give them.
And a familiar face returns to the campaign trail. Why Colin Allred believes his second run for Senate will end with a win. The race for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate appears to be getting tighter. Attorney General Ken Paxton started the summer with a double-digit lead in several polls over Senator John Cornyn. Now we're seeing a shift. A poll released last week shows Cornyn closing the gap. It comes from Texas Southern University's Barbara Jordan Public Policy Research and Survey Center. They polled 1,500 likely Texas Republican primary voters. 44% said they intended to vote for Ken Paxton in the March primary. That's 5 points ahead of Cornyn. The Texas Southern poll came a few days after an Emerson College poll showed Cornyn and Paxton in a dead heat. For perspective, previous polls showed Paxton with a double-digit lead over Cornyn. Earlier, I spoke with Julia Manchester, national politics reporter for The Hill, about the impact of the tighter polling between Cornyn and Paxton and how a third Republican could shake up the race.
You know, I'm hesitant to say this is neck and neck because the majority of polls still have Paxton up ahead of Cornyn. However, Cornyn's allies are, very much telling us that this is the recent polling that we've seen showing him narrowing the gap, or in some cases leading within that margin of error very narrowly, shows that they are closing the gap. We know that Cornyn and his allies have poured millions of dollars into this race. He, of course, has the Senate Leadership Fund at his back. That's essentially the campaign arm of the Senate Republicans. He has the support of Senate Majority Leader John Thune, the Senate campaign arm chairman Tim Scott. President Trump has not yet endorsed in this race. That's no surprise there. We know that he is friends with Ken Paxton. He obviously considers John Cornyn an ally. But right now, I think what you're seeing with Cornyn's allies is they want to try to come up with as many polls as possible to show to President Trump that Cornyn is closing the gap and that he, is essentially deserves President Trump's endorsement in this race. They think President Trump's endorsement would basically close that gap. We'll see. Some polling suggests that President Trump's endorsement doesn't have that big of an impact, but we'll see what other polling comes out in the future.
A lot of Texans have seen TV ads for Congressman Wesley Hunt. Those ads are airing statewide. He's not in the race now, but how much support is there for him to launch a campaign?
I think there is, some curiosity in Wesley Hunt. We've seen him in a number of polls getting anywhere from, 13 to 20% support. However, it's not enough, to take on Paxton or even John Cornyn. I think for a while, Wesley Hunt, and he still is, potentially looking at this angle, positioning himself as a candidate who can walk that line between the MAGA base and the more establishment Republican base. Someone who maybe is more electable, or he would argue he could be more electable than a John Cornyn, a new, fresh, young Republican face, not as much baggage as Ken Paxton, for example, on the other side of it. So he's, I think, been positioning himself, to fill in the lane that maybe Cornyn had previously filled. And we know that he's had some conversations with the White House, but he still hasn't gotten that Trump endorsement yet. Trump very much being hands-off on this race for now.
Whoever wins the Republican nomination will likely be favored in next year's general election. It has been more than 30 years since a Democrat won a statewide election in Texas, but one high-profile Democrat is hoping to end the streak. Former Congressman Colin Allred challenged Senator Ted Cruz in last year's election and lost. Allred spoke with Capitol Correspondent Dylan McKim about why he believes this time will be different.
I want to get right into this, okay? So back in 2024, you made a bid for a statewide position. You ran for U.S. Senate against Ted Cruz. You lost that election in November by almost 1 million votes. So we're not even a year past that yet, and you're running back in for another statewide position, again for the U.S. Senate. The question really is, why are you jumping back in so quick for another statewide position bid?
Yeah, well, listen, I spent 6 or 7 months with my family going to Home Depot, the airport, gas stations, having so many people coming up to me, telling me how concerned they were about what's happening in our state and in our country. Listen, I'm proud that in the last election, we outran the top of our ticket by over 5 points, but it wasn't enough. And as an athlete, I think you spend time thinking, well, what could you do differently. And I thought if I was going to do this again, that I'd want to do it to where we speak directly to working people who grew up the way I did. I was raised by a single mom in Dallas, was a public school teacher. We struggled growing up. I think in the last election, a lot of working people were made some promises about lowering their costs, being on their side. Those promises have been broken. In fact, their costs are going up. This is going to be a very expensive Christmas and holiday season for folks because of the tariffs and because of this bill that they just passed. And what we need is somebody who's going to be on our side and actually has ideas to unrig what I think is a rigged system and a rigged economy.
I saw an internal memo from your campaign. You traveled to Kerrville to talk to voters, correct?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, yeah, we were there to volunteer.
Volunteer?
Yeah,
Did you have a chance to talk to any voters
of course,
there?
yeah.
When I was down there after the floods, I remember seeing a flag draped over a business that said, "This is MAGA country," saying we're a big Trump country down there. Yeah. That's a big challenge for not just you, but any Democrat that wants to run in the state, is trying to get some of those rural Texans to flip over to Democratic vote. What's the messaging you can provide to those types of Texans in the rural areas that will get them to take you seriously and say, yes, I want to see Colin Allred in the U.S. Senate?
I'm so glad you asked that because listen, I feel like folks like John Cornyn, Ken Paxton, that they have failed rural Texas. This bill they just passed is going to likely lead, by some estimates, to 15 rural hospitals closing across our state. If you want to live in an area where you are hundreds of miles from a hospital, then vote for these guys, right? Because that's exactly what these policies are going to lead to. They voted against investing in our infrastructure in our rural communities. They've not helped us update the farm bill to make sure that we can bring in a new generation of farmers and keep farmers who want to stay there on their land. These tariffs are going to hit our farmers as well. So there's so much, I think. But also, when you talk about education, most of the small towns that I love to go to around our state, in many cases, the high school will be the center of that town. Don't try and go get some business on a Friday night, because everybody's going to be at the high school football game, right? And they're proud of their high school. And when we're taking money out of our public education system, when we're taking money out of the education system and devaluing it, that's hitting rural Texas harder than anywhere. And so, listen, I was captain of the football team at Baylor. I know who we are. I've seen the countryest boys in the world sitting right next to a kid who's never left the inner city, who understand working together that they actually have a lot in common and they become brothers. I think that we can bridge these divides. I've seen it. I know it's possible. I want to try and do it in the campaign.
While Allred leads the race for the Democratic nomination, a political outsider is trying to gain attention.
If we're going to win in Texas, I think we need to run a different type of candidate like me who can actually win.
We look at how a former astronaut is aiming to change the race for Senate. Early on, the race to determine the Texas Democrat who will run for Senate has been dominated by Colin Allred, but a political outsider is trying to gain attention. Terry Virts is a former fighter pilot and retired astronaut. He describes himself as a common-sense Democrat. Virts told our Adam Schwager why he believes his campaign can reach voters who've turned away from Texas Democrats.
So a lot of what we've been seeing from the Senate side, especially on the Democratic primary side, talk in the media is a lot about who isn't running or who may run. Yeah. In this environment, when everyone's talking about will Joaquin Castro or Beto or Tallarico jump in the race, with currently it's still just being you and Colin Allred, how do you promote your message and get your name out there?
Right, so step one is go talk to voters. So show up. I've been going to Democratic Club here. I spoke at the UT Democrats last night. It was awesome, hundreds of people there. Going around the state talking to folks, also going on media, things like this show, but also right-wing podcasts. Like as Democrats, we have to get our name out. And unfortunately, the coverage is often about the horse race, but the horse race isn't what matters. What matters is the actual things that are happening. What matters is that there's masked men yanking people off the streets, sending them to gulags. What matters is that there is military in American cities. I talked to a young man here at UT, Marine reservist, just got called up. He's having to leave school to go to an American city. He was really worried about it. He didn't know where he was. The redistricting, the gerrymandering arms race that was started by Donald Trump and Greg Abbott follows his boss in Mar-a-Lago. That's a really profoundly terrible thing for American democracy, and it's happening. And so the horse race is interesting. The actual issues are much more important. And here's my pitch to the Democratic Party. It's been 30 years of running the same type of candidate. If we're going to win in Texas, I think we need to run a different type of candidate like me who can actually win. And winning is all that matters right now.
Right now, it is just you and former Representative Colin Allred.
Right.
What do you think makes yourself stand out against former Representative Allred?
So I like Colin Allred. I think he's a good man. I wish he would have won the last election. I think America would be in a better place, but he didn't. And unfortunately in Texas, if you lose a Senate race, you don't win again. And I'm not a politician. You know, it may be Allred, there may be other traditional Democratic, politicians that can win in very strong blue Austin districts, but that's not going to win statewide in Texas. It's been 30 years. 1994, Ann Richards, the great Ann Richards, was governor of Texas the last time a Democrat won statewide. And I think that my resume as a military officer, 30 years in the Air Force as an F-16 pilot, as a NASA astronaut, that's a pretty unique perspective. I bring a focus on mission and not on politics, and I think that resume is going to resonate with Texans. They appreciate that. I'm definitely not a DC Democrat. I think the DC Democratic machine needs to be dismantled and rebuilt. And I think that's going to resonate in Texas.
There's much more to our interviews with the Democrats running for Senate, and you can see the unedited video online now. We posted the complete interviews with Virts and Colin Allred on our website. Just look for the links in this week's State of Texas story. Thank you for joining us again for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.